Welcome to the Building Up Women in Property podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca Bangura, and I'm thrilled to have you here with me today. This podcast is for ambitious women who work in property and construction, who want to learn how to have a career they love on their terms. Join me every week where I'll leave you excited and confident to take your next steps. Thanks for being here with me. Now let's get started. Hello, today we are talking about designing a life and career that you love. And this conversation is born from last week's episode. Last week we talked about creating intentional goals that stick, where you actually achieve the results you want. One of the things I spoke about was this need to be brutally honest about what it is you want. And that's an easy thing to say, but I know from experience that it's actually very hard. I first started working with a coach, which was about 9 years ago. It was the first time I stopped to imagine what my life and my career could look like if I created it from scratch. I struggled with that concept because as humans, we are trained to think about life in terms of incremental improvement. How do we get a little bit better at the thing we already know how to do? Rather than thinking about total reinventions, we call it the status quo bias, where our brain prefers to stick to the familiar and the comfortable. Our brains crave routine. They crave familiarity. And that's why we stick with what we know, even when we're unhappy. Creating a life and a career by design means teaching your brain to embrace possibility rather than clinging to what feels safe. I have always been ambitious, but I'd also been quite reactive in the sense that I would follow opportunities. I would seek out the next logical step in my career and make incremental changes rather than reinvent what was possible. And when I did finally start with this idea of a blank slate, it felt deeply uncomfortable because it meant letting go of my identity and my achievement and starting fresh. It was one of the most rewarding and pivotal shifts I made to really get clear, to get intentional about what it was that mattered to me. I realized that having a blank slate doesn't mean you have to discard everything, but it gives you the option to choose what stays, what goes, and what evolves. This is really about the choices we make. It's choice architecture. It allows us to be in control of our lives. It empowers us by giving us clarity and reducing decision fatigue. And in going through this process, it gave me incredible clarity. It allowed me to let go of beliefs that didn't serve me, like the belief that I had to work harder or longer to be more successful. And instead of reacting, I was in control. And I created a new blueprint for my life and for my career. When we can reframe our own narrative and set those intentional goals, we strengthen our prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for strategic thinking and self-regulation. And it allows us to think differently about problems and about opportunities. And it allows us to respond with more control and avoid unnecessary stress. And I want you, wherever you are in your career and your life, if you are feeling like you don't know where to start, then this episode is for you because I want to help you expand your vision for what is possible and to create a roadmap to build a career and life by design rather than default. And I'm going to give you 5 practical ways that you can go about doing this. These are the 5 things that, for me, over this last decade, have proven to be most beneficial to keep me on track. But before I delve in, I do want to share this with you. This process of designing our careers and living intentionally, it is something that we have to keep coming back to. This work is never done. Okay, let's get into strategy number 1. The first is to make a list of what you want and what you don't want in your life. This exercise creates clarity because it highlights the things that energize you and the things that drain you. Now, this might sound really obvious and you may think, oh, I already know what these things are. But the actual process of writing them down is really important because when we do that, we are actually able to reduce the mental clutter that is going on in our minds, right? This is a cognitive load. We are actually reducing the amount of things our brain is trying to hold on to, our brain is trying to remember. And it allows our brain to focus on positive actions. And I might have mentioned this last week, but when we do this, our reticular activating system, which filters information in our brains, is actually able to then filter and focus on the things that align with the goals you want and to discard that you don't want. But in order to do that, we need to name those things. We need to give our brain as much clarity and relevant information as we possibly can. So give yourself 5 minutes and write down that list of things that you want and the things that you don't want. Now, it might be helpful as you get started on this exercise to focus on one particular area of your life. It might be your career, it might be your health, it might be your personal life. Pick one area that once you get going. Exercise 2 is to do the remarkable life exercise. This is something I got from Debbie Millman, and it's a guided reflection that helps you identify the key areas where you want to grow and change. And you do that by writing a journal entry as your future self. And this is a really fun and easy exercise to do. Give yourself some time and space to just play with this idea and see what comes up for you. Write it as the person you want to be in 5 years. Really get into what a day in your life looks like. What are you doing? Where do you live? How is your time spent? Who is it spent with? What brings you joy? What excites you? By spending 45 minutes or an hour journaling on these things, it unlocks creativity and possibility. It allows us to engage the brain's processing centers, making abstract ideas more tangible so that we can translate those into our day-to-day lives. Now, number 3 is to create a personal mission statement. A mission statement grounds you and serves as a North Star for you to make decisions by. In much the same way that a company might have a mission statement, I want you to create one, your own personal mission statement, because it gives you your why. And when we have a clear why, we are more resilient and we have more intrinsic motivation. We are able to have more get up and go and be self-starters rather than waiting for other things to prompt us. We engage our brain differently. We tap into our hippocampus, and that reinforces our long-term memory. And it makes your purpose feel more ingrained into your daily actions. And as I've shared on here many times, so much of personal growth and personal development and coaching is about how we engage our brains. It's about rewriting the neural pathways to support us to create the results we want and to be the people we want to be in the world. Having this single statement can be really, really helpful in doing that. On to number 4. I want you to create a vision board. You can do this digitally on Pinterest or Canva, or, you can do a whiteboard, a scrapbook, but whatever you create, put it somewhere where you can see it. Because when you see a picture daily and visualize those daily, you stay connected with the future that you're building. And, visualization is so important. That's why we see top athletes have visualization as part of their performance training. And they mentally rehearse their movements. This is what having a vision board does for you. Include in it those images that evoke specific emotions that you want to feel. And finally, number 5, understand your values. Knowing your values helps you to make intentional choices and to avoid chasing goals that don't align with what matters most to you. And when we understand our values, it reduces that decision fatigue because we then have an inbuilt framework to make aligned choices. And so take the time to sit down and actually articulate what your values are. None of these are 5 exercises. They're complex, and it can be really easy to dismiss each one of these because they seem so simple, right? And I want to caution you against that because honestly, when you articulate these things and once you reinforce in your mind with complete clarity what it is you are working towards, what you want, what you don't want, why it's important to you, your brain will become laser focused on creating the outcomes you want. Because this is the difference between people that create the results they want and the people that just think about them. We want you to get these things down on paper. We want to give your brain absolute clarity and focus on what it is you want to achieve. And I promise you that when you do this, even if you just do 1 or 2 of these exercises, your brain will be so much more receptive to opportunities. It will be able to filter things out much more effectively, and it will set you up on the trajectory to creating that life and that career that you've consciously designed for yourself. And that is what we are all here to do. We are here to live out best lives, whatever that may look like. And it will look different for each of us. And that's okay. It's supposed to. But let's be honest and let's know for ourselves what we want. And in the process of getting this on paper, it is about creating new possibilities. And you don't need to commit to everything, but you need to consciously choose. And as I said earlier, this is not a one-stop shop. This is not work that we do once and then leave. The process of living intentionally requires us to revisit what we want at different points in our lives. This is not something we set and forget. This process of living intentionally requires us to come back and choose what it is that matters to us. And I invite you to do this as often as you need. That might be monthly, it might be yearly, it might be at different seasons of your life. But make this part of your awareness and part of your process as you are working towards being the version of you that you want to be and creating the life that you want to have. When I first did this exercise many years ago, what I wanted then is vastly different to what I want now. I'm in many ways a very different person to who I was then. I've grown and I've changed, and that's a great thing. One of my sons is starting school this year, and that's really forced me to think about work hours, who does pickups and drop-offs, and how we run logistics within my family to make everything work and to make sure that I'm present and engage with my kids in the way that I want. And it's funny because one of the things I identified that I wanted to do was have a couple of days a week where I finish work at 3 so that I can pick up my kids. And I've been shocked at how much resistance I have had in making this decision. And to be clear, I work for myself. I have a lot of flexibility and freedom around what I do and how I spend my time. But this one thing of finishing work early on 2 days, I've had to really go deep into why I want this. And it's completely crazy because I am in control of this decision. I don't need anyone else's approval. But I really had to think through the process to make that decision and to give myself permission to do this. I think that's such an interesting thing because we can say we want things, but we have to really know why. But we have to let ourselves go out and create them. We have to let it be a possibility that is alive in our minds and that we give ourselves complete freedom and permission to go for. And I tell you firsthand, that takes practice. And the more we can engage in this big picture thinking, and know why this matters, the more alignment and the more results we will see. And again, this isn't about starting with a blank slate and erasing your career and your life and your achievements to date. It's about really giving yourself that permission to choose what belongs in that next chapter of your life. And with this, start with one thing and build that momentum and then keep going. And as you pick one of these exercises to work on this week, I want you to notice what shifts in your thinking. And if you do want more guidance, please reach out. I would love to support you. You can find me at my website, rebeccabangura.com, or come over and reach out on LinkedIn and say hi. I'm excited for you to go away and do this work. As I said, this process has been transformative for me, and I'm sure it will be for you too. Have a beautiful week, and I look forward to talking with you next week. Thank you for joining me on the Building Up Women in Property podcast. I'm Rebecca Bangura, and if you'd like to learn more about what I do, head over to LinkedIn and connect with me. Have a beautiful day, and I'll see you next time.